Hey guys, this is The Shadow, your master of fear, coming to you live from somewhere you don't know. Proudly welcoming you to part 3, the final of the Darkness series entitled Eastward. The ending may not be what you expected, and, well, I just wanted to be done with the series, honestly. So, without further ado, lock your doors, bar your windows, turn out the lights, and prepare for The Darkness Part 3, Eastward. Now relax. This won't hurt too much.
I can't stay awake anymore. Can you drive yet?
Asked Steve exhaustedly. I was disturbed from my thoughts by Steve asking me this, and jerked in surprise. I could feel my right leg again, but unfortunately, the left still lacked significant feeling. That filled me with renewed optimism. Sure, but you'll have to give me a bit of help to get in the front seat. I looked up the rearview mirror again, seeing Steve's eyes flash relief. He slowly pulled off to the side of the road, took a deep breath, and got out and ran to my door. I was already sitting up, ready to go fast, as the rain was still pouring with no end in sight. We had been driving since 3 this morning, and Steve just couldn't do it anymore. After the switch was complete, Steve immediately fell asleep, and I pulled out, driving cautiously for now, as I was still getting used to my legs again. All through the day, we didn't see one car pass us. There were plenty of cars that we passed, in the ditch, sure, but no one was on the road. I sighed, the wipers hypnotizing me as they usually do, and drove on, the steady sound of rain showing no signs of abating. A few hours later, I got quite hungry, the need for the bathroom also apparent. Steve still slept on in the back seat, snoring softly. I spied a gas station off in the distance, but as I grew closer, it was obvious that the place was abandoned. The lights were out and the windows were all smashed, apparently in the looting that it began as the storm did. I pulled over nonetheless and parked, leaving the car running. I got out and half-limped, half-dragged myself around the side of the building. The bathroom inside was probably still intact, but the way that I had to move, I didn't want to tangle with the broken windows as a point of entry. I finished, and as I turned and shambled back to the car, I heard Steve call out, "Jack?" Evidently, he had woken up and found himself alone. "Coming back!" I shouted to him, hoping that he heard me. I got back in the car, falling into the seat.
Where were you?
Asked Steve. "When you gotta go, you gotta go," I responded. He smirked at this as we reversed out of the parking lot and continued east on the highway. A few minutes later, Steve said,
"Can you put the radio on?"
I answered him by turning on the radio, and was met with static. We exchanged a look, and then I started going across the dial, hoping to find something other than just plain static.
And remember, Jesus loves you and is coming back. Don't despair, fellow Christians, for the end may be here, but you'll be spared from the fires of hell. Take solace in the fact that I dialed away from the station, and then came across a news broadcast. Anything is better than apocalyptic religious fare, I thought. I was wrong. The news was just more about the storm, the darkness, and now, the epidemic of murder that appeared to have taken the country by storm, pardon the pun. "Hey Steve, why don't you check the radar again?" I said, and watched as he pulled out the laptop and powered it up. There was a chime of low battery, so Steve reached down and found only one left. There should have been at least 2. We had been using the computer non-stop since we left, but it made no sense of why there was only one left. It came to me. As we fled the storm shelter, I remembered dropping one battery. Now we had a serious issue. It was at least another 3 days of driving before we arrived in Connecticut, where my parents lived, and if we wanted to stay ahead of the storm, we would need to monitor its movements constantly, something that was now impossible. The remaining battery would only buy us maybe 3 hours, and constantly shutting down and starting up would drain the battery further. Steve and I looked at each other, frustration on each of our faces as we realized both of our mistakes in our hurry to vacate. Still, I kept driving.
"Hey, Jack?"
Steve began, worry in the tone of his voice. "Yeah?"
"Take a look at this. I want to know, am I just seeing things?"
I looked over at the computer, then back at the road, then over at the computer, staring wide-eyed and slack-jawed at the sight. The radar screen was completely black, the storm having completely taken over.
Jack, watch the road!
Steve shouted, and then everything went black. I woke up, blinking sleep from my eyes, hoping no one had noticed. I was back in university, watching a guest lecture performed by one Jim Wilkes. I had been up all night finalizing a writing project for an English assignment, and so falling asleep in class was inevitable. The course I was in was some environmental junk, which I only took because my best friend Steve convinced me to. I was working towards a degree in English studies, but I needed a minor in something, which, after some convincing, turned out to be environmental studies. Steve elbowed me and gave me a look. I shrugged, and then turned back to the front of the room.
Dude, what the hell? How could you fall asleep?
Steve said to me as we were leaving class. Hey, this is your thing, not mine. I was up all night working on an assignment, and that guy was so boring. I couldn't help it, I responded. Steve turned and walked away, grumbling.
Hey man, sorry about earlier.
Steve said as we walked into our dorm room. Yep, we were even roommates. No problem.
So, what is that? That new project you're working on?
It's a story about a huge storm that eventually covers the entire country and kills everyone.
Can I read it?
I'll read it to you. I began. I lay in my bed, staring up at the ceiling. A light touch on my wrist made me jump slightly.